Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the first part of the online session this afternoon. That you had some good discussions in your breakout. So we're moving on to the final session now of the online program. This session is all about opportunities for public engagement. So it's a really interesting topic. We've got some great speakers lined up for you. So first off, we've got Erik van Sebille. Hello, Erik. He is a professor of oceanography and public engagement at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. So he will start us off this afternoon, and then we'll move on to another talk by Marie-Céline Piednoir. And she is from Sea Legacy, which is a marketing agency for the ocean, which she'll tell us more about later. And then again, like the breakout sessions, will also have an interactive question and answer session. So you're welcome to note down your questions in the chat as we go, or just save them for the second part of the discussion, and Paula will be monitoring the chat later on. So over to you, Erik, for your talk.
Okay, thank you very much. Great to be here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm assuming that you can now see my screen. All good?
Yeah, all good.
And I hope that the internet connection holds out. I'm in a hotel here in Miami, so let's see that works. But please let me know if the internet connection is too poor. Then I'll talk a little bit slower. But anyway, it's great. It's great to be able online, and I'm really sorry that I had to miss the first 1.5 days in Sète itself, because it really sounded amazing what has been discussed and what has been presented. And of course, the topic of this conference, it is really close to my heart. I am an oceanographer. I'm trained as a physicist, so I call myself a physical oceanographer. And in that role, I investigate how ocean currents move stuff around. And it's stuff that can be anything from water itself, heat, nutrients, plankton, fish, plastic, everything that is moved and connected between the different ocean continents, basins, and the type of picture that I would show, that I would start my my presentations on, if they were about ocean physics, would be what you would see here. So this is a map. I often call it the spaghetti plots of the type of simulations that we do within our models. It shows how the ocean currents move virtual particles at the surface of the ocean. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today, because today is actually about a new role that I have. Since last year, I was appointed professor of oceanography and public engagement. And it means that 1 day a week, I can spend into researching the effectiveness of public engagement. So that is much more about this type of picture. How do we see how do we communicate about the ocean, and what is effective communication about the ocean, and why would we even want to communicate about the ocean, right? So that is really about taking the person, the people, and their relation to the ocean, and that's really exciting for me. So it may sound a bit strange, right? Why do you have a chair in oceanography and public engagement? But the whole point behind this is, of course, well, as you all know, that we're in an absolute climate crisis, and that climate crisis, even though climate literacy will not be the panacea to solve it all, it is important that there is climate literacy among publics, that we have some common ground to talk about policy options, for example, for addressing the climate crisis. And most of the publics, when they think about climate crisis, they often think about what's close to their home. It's about bushfires, it's about droughts, it's about changes in vector-borne diseases, maybe about sea level. But I would argue that actually the ocean is a unique conduit, a unique stage to talk about the climate crisis. Of course, the ocean plays a key role in climate through storing heat and carbon, but it also is an very good entry point for public engagement. The ocean is enigmatic, it's exciting, it's maybe romantic. Many people have a predisposition about the ocean, right? It is cool to talk about the ocean. The Jacques Cousteaus of this world have done a fantastic job at selling the ocean as this place that we know so little about, that is so adventurous. So that's one part of it. The other part, which I think is maybe even more important, is that the ocean is pretty unique in that it really links socio-economic choices that we do on land, that we do in our everyday lives, to very remote impacts. And what I mean with that is that if you think about, say, plastic pollution, which I work a lot on in my research, it is quite bizarre or surprising to think that people choose not to use a plastic straw or to refuse a plastic bag because they have the feeling that if they do take that, they would have an impact on turtles somewhere in the open ocean, to say it very simple. So our daily life choices are somewhat controlled by very remote impacts. And I would argue that that's actually the thing that's missing in the climate change the discussion, right? No one thinks about the CO2 directly that is emitted when they take their car, how that actually impacts the tropical rainforest in Brazil. So it's much harder to do that for climate, but it is possible to do that for the ocean, and especially plastic. And the other thing is that the ocean is, of course, a commons. It's a shared responsibility. So you get away a bit from the politics of individual countries and international collaborations and international blaming and finger pointing, because we all care about the ocean. Now, so what do I do? I'm starting a research line into the effectiveness of public engagement. And the key point here is that as a scientist, or as scientists in general, we have a workflow, and all parts of that scientific workflow have a protocol. They've been codified. We've done tested, well-developed methods for how to do science. Think about setting up a hypothesis, coding a model, publishing results, of course, with a peer review process. Everything is codified except science communication. Science communication has very little evidence base, right? Once we start doing science communication, then very often it comes down to intuition. So my research question is, how can academics in particular be most effective in their public engagement and really build an evidence base for what academics can do? Because the question really is, what is the added value of academics, climate scientists in the public debate? I assume that most of you are communication professionals in this audience, and you've trained for this. You have a degree maybe in this, so you know how to do science communication. Why then should climate scientists be in the public debate? What is really the added value? And should we not better spend our time just doing the science and let all the communication to communication professionals? And if these scientists are in the public debate, then which roles should they take? Should we be the heroes of the story? Should we be the informers? Should we be neutral, right? The honest brokers, if you want to think about Roger Pielke. Should we maybe be the villains of the story in some ways? Or, as we'll come back in the end, should we be the warners? And should we warn about climate change? Now, also related to that is how to define the limits of expertise. How do scientists among each other actually set up what we want to talk about and what is beyond our own expertise, and how to protect that, and how to set norms within the scientific community that we all agree on when and what we can talk about. And finally, and most interesting, and what I want to spend the next 5 minutes on is it really effective for scientists, in particular climate scientists, to be publicly activistic? I am very, very worried about the climate crisis, and I would love to be activistic more and shout out, but I wonder whether it is actually effective for me to do that, or whether as a scientist, as an oceanographer, whether it would hurt my credibility if I come out as too activistic. And that credibility argument is something that you hear very often, especially from the older generation of scientists that say, no, scientists should be neutral. But actually, if you look into the literature, that may not be really true. And I'm going to show two examples from the literature that hint at that actually it's pretty okay, or the public maybe even expects scientists to be activistic. And one is from this paper by John Kocher and colleagues, and it's from 2017, so arguably already a while ago. It's US data. It's before Trump and fake news and everything, but still I think it has some interesting pointers about activism. And what this group did was they did a large survey. They created a climate scientist persona, fake climate scientist, and they let that climate scientist make statements, so short press release style statements about results. And then they asked 1,000 people drawn randomly in a survey from the US to gauge the credibility of that fake climate scientist. And the credibility scale was from 1 to 7. And what you see is that if the climate scientists talked about their recent finding, then the credibility was actually pretty high, 5.2 almost, on a scale of 7. That is pretty good. Scientists are credible in the public's mind. But the interesting thing is then they started to actually tweak the message that this fake scientist was actually putting out, from also talking about the risks and the impacts of those findings. The credibility stayed the same. If the climate scientist talked about policy options and consequences, then the credibility dropped a little bit, but not significantly. If the climate scientist talked about actions, saying really in that press release, we need action now, this is really worrying, we need to do something about climate change, then the credibility actually increased a little bit, although not significantly. If they even talk specifically about reducing carbon dioxide emissions, that was then still not really hurting their credibility. It was only when that climate scientist talked about nuclear power, when they talked about nuclear power, that actually the credibility dropped a little bit. But this really clearly to me shows that it is fine in terms of credibility that climate scientists are taking activist stands and actually talk about policy options, talk about what needs to be done. And another line of research is this one, by a group from Switzerland in ETH and Yale in the US. And they looked into, well, how much would you support advocacy being done by scientists for 5 different types of policies, which are the 5 rows here, and then both in Germany in blue and in the US in red. And what's really, really interesting here is that in almost all of these cases, the public supports or agrees that climate scientists should actively advocate. What's also interesting is that, especially in the US, the public expects this more than the scientists in each case. The scientists are a bit more worried and a bit more hesitant to actually be publicly activistic, but the public expects this, wants this, and agrees with if scientists would do this. So that I think is where I want to leave it for now, with these 2 nice pieces of research, and really making the point that scientists probably do have a role. I think they are seen as warners. And in our public engagement in science communication, we should give them that role, warning about what they see. I mean, climate scientists and oceanographers are paid mostly by taxpayers' money to keep an eye, essentially, on how the ocean is doing. And as soon as we see something that is problematic and that is worrying, we should shout out on it, because that is what the public pays us for. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Erik. That was very, very interesting, and I have a lot of questions for you, but I'll hold them off until the discussion session. And for now, we will hand over to Marie-Céline for her presentation.
Hey, congrats on the pronunciation. Yeah, so hello everyone. Same, I would have loved to be in Sète, but I'm not going to complain. I'm right now in Taghazout in Morocco. Also really, really nice place, highly recommended. So to tell you a little bit more about myself, I do not come from the marine conservation world or marine biology. I studied like business, marketing, communication. I worked a little bit in luxury. Then I moved to the sports industry. And then I was like, okay, I want more meaning to what I'm doing and how I use my expertise. So I moved to first a local NGO, replanting corals. And once you enter the ocean conservation world, you're like, wow, first of all, I learn every single day. Then you feel useful. You see there is a lot to do. And you see that especially regarding communication and marketing, scientists, local NGOs, even bigger ones, they really need to work on how they share the info, the content, the findings, the risks, the hope with the general audience. So we all have an action. So since almost 2 years now, I'm with Sea Legacy. So I'm going to focus my presentation on this particular NGO I work for. So let me share my screen. Here we are. So one thing to know about Sea Legacy is that actually 2 of our founders, Christina Mittermeier and Paul Nicken, are scientists. Sorry for that. They are scientists. I didn't want to open this one. Yeah, they are scientists. So everything we do is actually guided by science. And we always say that we're driven by purpose. We call ourselves like the global marketing, education, and communication agency for the ocean. And we always make sure that everything we do is based on science. But what we do is that thanks to Christina, Paul, and Andy, the 3 founders, who are one of the top videographers and photographers in the world, we do have amazing content that we can use to raise awareness about what's going on for the ocean. So I'm going to start the presentation with a 2-minute video so you can understand what I'm talking about and see the kind of contents we have. Did you see like the Zoom bar in the middle of the screen or not?
Don't see that. We just see
Okay.
your cursor, yeah.
Perfect, amazing. So let's go.
Have your sound, Mary Celine.
It's not on?
No.
Okay,
I think
share
you have
computer
to.
sound. Let's do
Yeah.
it again. Perfect. So I hope that when I was talking about powerful content, you could see it in this video. So this is our strength, it's the power of the content, so we can tell stories. So I'm going to add some marketing terms because we are the marketing agency for the ocean. So we call it like storytelling plus. So this is our unique ability to transform the narrative. And as you can see, we really inspire through hope. It can be really depressing what's going on with climate change, but we believe that if we like initiate some hope in people, it's easier for them to take action afterwards. This is one thing maybe we can discuss after, but we do see that on social media, what really performs, it's like really shocking images, but it got proven that it's not what is going to trigger action afterwards. It's kind of paralyzing for people. So we really try to always have a touch of hope in what we're doing. We have 3 priorities areas, so blue natural capital, policy summits, and 30 by 30. So what I'm going to show you, it's like I just selected one image from one of each of our founders. So this is from Christina Mittermeier. This is from Paul Nicken. And this is from Andy Mann. So we use those images and other tools we have to raise awareness about the ocean. And we always also collaborate with scientists. So we have expeditions. We have the boats you saw in the video, the Sea Legacy one that goes across the ocean and capture contents. We do take action at different summits and events throughout the year. We create media campaigns with different NGOs and also with politics. And we have a great network of different NGOs, scientists, foundations, philanthropists that help us for the different campaigns. I just wanted to quickly show you the digital ecosystem we do have. We have, for sure, website, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. I do invite you all to check at some point if you want to know more about what we do for the ocean, the different campaigns, the beautiful content we have. So I would say the place where you can see the most updated info and content would be Instagram. So up to you to then follow and scroll through. So to focus more about the collaboration we have with scientists, I just decided to like select 4 of the top examples from the past year, actually. We've been, for example, collaborating in Costa Rica with a lot of local NGOs, and we are putting pressure on the government so they would move sharks under the management responsibilities of the Ministry of the Environment and not the Institute of Fisheries and Aquaculture, because actually lots of marine species in Costa Rica, they do have protection, but just the fact that sharks are under the wrong ministry, those laws do not apply. So what we're doing is that we did capture content in Costa Rica, we created videos, we pushed like billboards in the countries, we collaborate with a lot of local ambassadors, athletes, NGOs. So it's really to put pressure, and it is working. Like we are talking with politicians and so on. The president changed, so we have to do it again, but we're still working on this. Another great example that I love about what we're doing, it's in the Bahamas. So the Dr. Austin Gallagher with Beneath the Wave, they were studying tiger sharks, and the tiger sharks were always going back to the same place. And they were like, what's going on there? So they added some cameras on some of them, and it actually brought them to the largest seagrass habitat known in the world. And Christina, our founder, she was like, oh, did you know Carlos Duarte in Coast University? And Dr. Austin Gallagher was like, yeah, no. So we connected them. We had amazing content about the seagrass. And if you combine all of this, like the budget from a big university, the finding from scientists, beautiful contents, it ended up being published in Nature, which was a big step. And we do have our images in this article, and it was raised around all digital platforms. So this is one thing that I've seen in the past 2-3 years. I'm working in ocean conservation. Scientists are going to work years and years and years about one article, one figure, one graph, then it's published. And then for the general audience, it's never seen. So I think this is really important. How do you collaborate with like scientific journals so the general audience knows about it? Another example is about Antarctica. I guess you all heard about Camilar and how slow everything is going. So for the past 2 years, we're also trying to support this initiative with some of the beautiful content you've seen in the video. And how do you make the general audience realize the importance of krill, about the currents in the ocean coming from Antarctica and so on. So maybe step by step, we have a pressure on the politics and on the governments, and at last they take action. And the last one would be in the Eastern Tropical Pacific Ocean. We do have great contacts in Latin America, in the governments, and with like local NGOs. And so we are pushing Panama, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and Colombia. So they would expand their marine protected areas. And so it would like create a seascape for species to migrate. And the last one I wanted to talk about, to give a last example, because it just happened last week and it was a really big step for us, was at CITES. We really pushed for the proposal 37 from Panama to go through. It was to protect like the requiem sharks. And we, to be fully honest, we were ready for this not to work. We had like a marketing plan in place to keep on bringing hope if it got rejected. But since Panama did a great job at promoting locally, we also helped with billboards all around the country. We put pressure with top ambassadors through all Latin America. Like we knew that Brazil, we knew that some countries were like, what do we vote? So we talked to local NGOs in those countries. We had big names on social media, raising awareness about what was going on. And in the end, and with the amazing work of scientists and local NGOs, we are just the inhibitor of all of this. It actually got accepted. It was a big step for us. So I would say this is also a great example of how the right content, the right video, creating emotions and hope can help the political agenda and real action. So yeah, that's it. Feel free to reach out after the CommOCEAN summit if you have any question.
Thank you so much, Mary, Celine. Another very interesting talk, and yeah, it's nice to, your video was amazing, so it's nice to see such well put together content. So just a quick reminder to everyone to put all of your questions to Erik and Marie, Celine in the chat. We already have a question asking if we can have a link to the video.
Oh, sure.
Maybe you can put it in the chat, Marie, Celine, if you have it. So I will start off with a couple of my questions. So the first is to Erik, and you mentioned that actually the public is sort of expecting scientists to engage in activism. So where do you think that sort of this expectation of the scientists that maybe they shouldn't be doing that, or that, you know, it might impact negatively on their perception or credibility as a scientist, where do you think that's coming from? Is that coming from within the scientific community perhaps, and is there something that needs to change within our own community if that's something that the public is expecting and can be quite helpful for society, in fact?
Yeah, a good point. And I think you're right that it is this norm about neutrality comes very much, I think, from within the scientific community. So the term honest broker, which is a term that was coined by Roger Pielke in his 2007, I think, book, that he made a very strong case for that scientists should never be issue advocates. And that has really, well, even before, so people thought that already, but since 2007, that's really been the implicit norm within the scientific community, even though there have been plenty of papers, both empirical, like I showed, but also more philosophical and ethical, that say that that is not true, that scientists should actually be activistic, that even norm-wise, it is, you can't, as a scientist, keep suggesting that you that you're neutral or impartial, because every scientist in the first place is a human being. So we act as human beings, and that is what we should acknowledge. And I think that most of the work actually needs to be done within the scientific community. to get this more awareness. And when I give presentations, I'm now on the East Coast of the US tour, where I'm giving seminars at all these institutes. It's the old professors, to be honest, that are really shocked if I show this, and that they start talking about trust and about impartiality. But it's along the younger generations are fully on board with me, and they look at me saying, well, what are you talking about? Obviously, this is so. Obviously, we want to be advocates. So it may also be a generational thing. And well, I mean, the old generation at some point is going to go. So that's the good news then.
Yeah. And do you see some changes as well over time? So you're now touring around to the US and giving these talks. So yeah, so that's sort of one way to raise awareness, you know, as this additional role that scientists can play in society. But have you seen change over time?
Well, I think that Extinction Rebellion is a very strong player in this field. And for example, I see in my own institute that many of the young scientists and the PhD students are very actively involved in Extinction Rebellion. And at some point, I got a call from one of my own PhD students who said that he was calling me because he couldn't join the regular meeting that we had because he was in jail. And I was very proud of him at that point. So yes, this is changing. We can't let the climate crisis go by with all this knowledge that we have about how bad it is. It's our duty to speak out.
And do you have some specific tips for scientists that want to engage more in activism about how to go about that while also maintaining their credibility in the scientific community?
Well, I mean, do speak from your expertise. I think that is important, and that's also what you show. What was shown in that first paper that I showed. I mean, if you want to speak as a scientist in your role of a scientist, then realize where the expertise of the boundaries of your expertise are. I don't think there's yet a good definition of how to actually define expertise. For myself, I have a working definition of if I would be comfortable speaking about a topic in a first year undergraduate class, then I would be comfortable speaking about it in the media. That works quite well for me, but that's something also that I want to explore, right? I mean, how do we actually define expertise in this case? But yeah, if you stick with that, then start and join groups, Extinction Rebellion, Scientists for Future, all of these groups that are out there. Sea Legacy, maybe.
Yeah, I think that the issue of expertise is quite interesting as well, because I think the public often assumes scientists are experts in a lot of things, and you get asked a lot of random questions and people expect you to know all the answers. But then again, you know, scientists are experts in one specific topic usually, but that, you know, they often know a lot about a lot of topics around it, more so than the general public. So, you know, you're probably more of an expert than, you know, you think in a lot of different topics. So
exactly. And there's some norm setting that needs to be done within the scientific community, because I think it's the scientists among each other that hold these very strict boundaries of what someone else's expertise is. And that's why as I said, I think that a workable definition could be, would you be able to talk about this in a first year undergraduate class? Then suddenly your expertise, then I can talk about anything in the ocean essentially, because I would be more than willing to do that in a classroom setting.
And Marie-Céline, do you have any input into your opinions on the role of scientists in activism based on your work with the marketing agency, because you're sort of working at the interface of that as well, also collaborating with scientists? I'm interested to hear more about your experiences on the ground with that.
Yeah, I mean, my personal feeling and what I feel here, it's like you need to be a bit more activist. It's my first answer. But then my boyfriend is actually a marine biologist. He works at Woods Hole Ocean Institute. So it's like he's in the heart of science. And I do see how neutrality is really important. So like, if I look at it with personal and work opinion, I would say that the ideal is that scientists keep the neutrality, but then collaborate with people who do have the expertise to raise awareness about what they discovered, and then can help them explain what's going on in a way that ignites action for the rest of like the people or the politicians. Yeah, so I think it's more collaboration, and scientists do need to stay neutral and give us the facts. I mean, it's the base of science. That's why we trust scientists most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an interesting point as well, because there's multiple ways that scientists can engage with communicating their work to the wider public and activism. So it can be, you know, directly through engaging in activities themselves, or it can also be with collaborating with specialists in communication, or for example, your agency. So, you know, there's always a way to get the messages out there to a wider audience. And I also wanted to ask you, Marie-Céline, so you mentioned also this fine balance between messages of hope, and also that the stories relating to fear or something shocking is what sells the most. So how do you strike that balance in storytelling, or do you have any tips for, you know, how much hope to have versus a bit of shocking stories? And yeah, we don't want too much doom and gloom in there, but, you know, maybe a mix of both is the best way to get attention.
Yeah, so we realized, so if I speak really like marketing and digital, we do realize, like, for example, on social media, when you start with like shocking images, you're going to reach more people, you're going to have better metrics. But then when it comes to having people really act, take the time, I don't know, sign a petition or go for a local event or chasing their habits, it's usually when they have hope. Like I mean, even my job, I do it because I still have a little bit of hope. I guess all of us here, even if we're kind of depressed every single day, we still have hope. And that's why we still work in ocean conservation. So once again, everyone has its own place. There are huge accounts only pushing shocking images. If you want to follow them and listen to what they're saying, then it's your choice. What Sea Legacy has decided is to go towards hope with beautiful content. So once again, some people do really well the shocking. We decided to focus more on the hope and the beauty of the ocean to raise awareness and push for action. So yeah, I think everyone can decide how they want to, push people to act.
Yeah. I guess it depends on the story as well and the situation. Yeah. Okay, so we'll open the floor up now to the questions from the audience. So I've got Paula here who's been scrolling the chat, and we'll pick out a couple questions for us to ask to Erik and Marie-Céline.
Yeah, so I think the first one is to Erik, and it was from Anne, and she was asking, it seems that the public has lost some of their trust in science and scientists, perhaps since the COVID crisis. Are you aware of any studies kind of looking into that and seeing whether that's actually the case?
No, it's a good point, Anne, indeed. I haven't seen any newer data about credibility and trust. But if I, like, from my own intuition, I mean, of course, it's difficult, and you have to be careful not to kind of like generalize from my own experience. But I do also feel that maybe this whole idea of lack of trust is really only in the very vocal minority. There's a silent majority that still trusts science, that is still getting vaccinated. And in communication, there's so much focus on this small group that is vocal but doesn't trust science anymore. Maybe we should just leave them and ignore them or so. I know it's hard to ignore them, but maybe that is a strategy. So I'm more hopeful than what you would suggest, that there's a lack of trust. That's also actually, there is some data from, I know here in the Netherlands, where the Rathenau Institute is doing an annual polling of the trust in different professions, and scientists are still, even post-COVID, at the top, and it hasn't really decreased. So in that sense, it's more hopeful than you would think.
That is very encouraging indeed. And then there's a couple of questions from Marie-Céline kind of on a similar theme. So Natalie Fox was saying she assumes you might be surfing if you're out in Morocco. And she was asking about, you know, what kind of observations do you have about how surfers use their knowledge of the sea to be active in these kind of programs, and about the use of hope in messaging. And then Kim also asked more generally, you know, apart from hope and fear, what other types of elements can you use to make an effective narrative? So, you know, would that be solutions or credibility of success or something like that? So do you have any reflections more on that?
Yeah, Natalie, love the question. I am indeed surfing in Morocco. After this, I'm going to close my computer and go for sunset session. So surfers are usually more involved or aware of what's going on, because when you surf, you follow the tide, you follow the swell, you have the patience of the ocean, you know how one session can be amazing, the other one horrible, you know the power of the ocean, you know the beauty. Like, I think you have a special connection, which is beautiful. So you do have a lot of organization who do an amazing job. I mean, for sure, WSL Pure, Surf Riders, Surfers Against Seawage, Save the Wave. They do a very, very good job. I was actually at UNOC in Lisbon, and a lot of events were led by pro surfers, big wave surfers. So it's a great way to reach an audience. And the way I see at it is like, if surfers do not care and don't take action, who would take action? So I think that using the surfing community is a great entry point to reach an audience that could take action. And you do have surfers all around the world. But then one tip is not to get stuck with audiences that already know about the ocean. A lot of NGOs, when they use social media, especially, they're going to target people who like surfing, diving, traveling, and so on. But then you stay in your bubble. And yeah, when you talk with them, you have hope because everyone is aware of what's going on. The next level would be to enter the gaming, beauty, cooking audiences, because those people are the ones who maybe don't even know what's going on. So yeah, it's a great entry point. But then you need, once you have reached this and you know you are doing a good job, you need to like extend the different audience. And regarding Kim, effective, okay. Yeah, we always try to have so we always try to have everything we do like educational. We usually use the do you know, or have you heard, or did you know? A fact usually really helps. We're going to grab the attention with images and content, or with a fact to get the interest of people. I've heard solution. Yeah, offering a solution is really important, and credibility is the base of everything. Like, I don't think you can last long in the ocean conservation world if you don't have credibility from the start. You can have a peak of like fame and so on, but then if you don't have scientists and credibility behind, it's not going to work. So yeah, credibility is super important. Offering solutions and educations and facts, it's what I think going to trigger action. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. I've got a question for Erik, and then I've got another one that I've just seen from Erik for Marie-Céline. So we'll go through those two. So first of all, for Erik, and it's kind of working on the question that Nancy already posted a question. I think you already responded to it, sort of saying, you know, that there's these stories of scientists who, you know, have actually ended up jeopardizing their careers because the people selecting them for their jobs are still of the old traditional generation. So reflecting on kind of the risks of being too activistic, but also on the other side, you know, do we risk if we're not engaged in communication? Kind of where is the balance between those two in your view?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that this all comes back to the role of public engagement in academic careers and academic workflow. I mean, most academics are evaluated on their research, maybe their education, and then if they're lucky, a little bit on what's called impact or outreach, or even valorization, which is an awful word, of course. And that is changing. The open science movement, which is very active in Europe and also actually getting traction here in the US where I'm now, there and with society. That is what open science is about in my perception. And that also means that recognition and reward schemes are changing, especially in Europe, where career choices and time put into science communication, public engagement is more valued by institutions, by funders, maybe not directly by line managers who are very often not aware yet that this is happening. But I would say give it a few more years and it is totally normal to have a perfectly good academic career and a very rewarding academic career that focuses much more on outreach and impact and a little bit less maybe on education or research. So again, let's change the system from within. We're not there yet, but we're going in the right direction.
Thanks. I think that is a very useful reflection. And then I'll ask your question to Marie-Céline. Seems a bit counterproductive, but I'll go with it. So Erik says, I have a question for Marie-Céline. Most of your campaigns and also the shots are really focused around sort of charismatic species and the megafauna and vertebrates. Is this a problem? You know, is that a concern? Should we be worried? And perhaps the krill campaign is a good example of, you know, an alternative picture that we're looking at.
Yeah, so first of all, Paula, thank you for flagging the question because I had to look for vertebrates. I was like, what is this? Yeah, it's true that in the video we have a lot of megafauna and like not too many cute animals, actually. We do realize that if you have a cute penguin or a baby polar bear or dolphin or beautiful wave with with our calf, it does work better. So it's kind of a grabbing the attention, but then we usually diversify and talk about a lot of different things. We have a campaign around krill, and then we're going to use scientific facts. Like, I mean, facts about krills can like blow your mind. You can be like, wait, what? Same facts about reefs. Like, how do you explain to people about a zooxanthella, a symbiosis with a polyp, like, but then you create a story around it. You're going to have this beautiful image of a reef. Maybe you started with a beautiful tiger shark before, and then you're going to come with the education, with the fact, with the storytelling. So this is how we try to also talk about it. We also have a huge campaign about mangroves. But great example is the Nature article. We didn't start, I mean, I have nothing to do about amplifying the Nature article, but they didn't start with like, what is mangrove or seagrass? Sorry, seagrass for that one. They started by the beautiful story of tiger sharks, bringing them to the seagrass. And then it got a great coverage because storytelling was there. So it's true that we usually grab the attention with more vertebrates, but we also have a lot of campaigns around the like mangrove, seagrass, krills, reefs, and so on.
Thanks. I'll hand back to Britt because I think we've got great questions coming in, so it's wonderful.
Yeah, so there's a couple more questions for you, Marie-Céline. So there's one question on how do your campaigns get funded? So yeah, maybe we'll start with that one and then I'll ask a follow-up question.
Yeah, sure. So we, I should have the link with me. So we have, I would say, 3 different kinds of funding. The first one is called the Tide. So those are like monthly donors. You can give from $5 to, let's give $1,000. So you can see, I'm going to drop it in the chat so you can see how marketing-wise we do the fundraising. So we have monthly donors who all of the money goes directly to funding the different campaigns. Then you have big donors. Welcome to the US and Canada NGO world. They are like big donors funding our work. So it's individuals. And then we also pitch for grants to big foundations. So for example, we're pitching right now to Pew for Antarctica. We're pitching to Minderu for Baja California. We're working with Blue Nature Alliance. So depending on the projects, topics, we collaborate with foundations.
Yeah. And I'm wondering as well, how do scientists get involved? How do you connect with them? Or, if they're interested to get involved in a campaign with your organization, how would they go about that?
Yeah. So 90% of the time, maybe even more, we elevate the work, the amazing work of local NGOs and scientists. It's usually people who are working for years on a campaign, who have done all the research. And it's like we elevate what they're doing through the beautiful content, storytelling, and our expertise. So usually it's through the local NGOs or the universities working on the campaign that we get to know those scientists. It's not usually us that go directly to the scientists.
Okay.
It's usually through a campaign that we're going to collaborate with them.
Yeah, yeah. And do you have, are there differences in the campaigns that you design for different audiences? So for the policymakers versus for the public, and how does that work? What are those differences?
Yeah, we mainly target the general audiences. So it's going to be the content you're going to see in the digital ecosystem I've shown you. But then, for example, when we have the chance to have a direct contact with politics, we always have what we call a hero video. So we try to create this very beautiful video of the beauty of the ocean in their country. So they realize the beauty and also the value of it. Because in the future, like the ocean, yeah, it's going to be a great value. And what I wanted to say, sorry, I lost. So the general audience, and something that's also, I think, pretty sad, especially in Latin America, we work a lot there. When big ambassadors like superstars, actors, singers do share, it puts pressure on the governments. And it's sad because you see like those scientists who work for years on something, and then you have the big football player talking about it and it's in the news and it puts pressure on them. So this is also where we try to support with our huge network of ambassadors to put pressure on the media in the local, like in the different countries.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, yeah, I have one more question for Erik, actually, going back to the topic of, yeah, that in science, everything's very well documented and has protocols until we get to the science communication. So what are your recommendations for that? Do you think we need to have better protocols? And, well, obviously we have this CommOCEAN conference where we're sharing best practices, so that's already a good start. But what more needs to be done there?
Yeah, and of course I do realize that statement was maybe a bit provocative, and I'm sure that it's not entire, that there are examples of good tested evidence-based methods, but I do think in general that it is true that most science communication lacks evidence base. That it is really more from the practitioners. It's a skill rather than a science, right? Or an art rather than a science. And maybe it will always be that way, but I really think that we can do more testing, more A/B testing. Maybe not so much of the impacts of the science communication and public engagement that we do, but for sure the outcomes. And better define goals of science communication activities. I just read a paper that was really skeptical that very often the goals are extremely low in science communication. It is like, oh yeah, I want to reach people, or I want to set up a Twitter account. That's not a goal by itself, of course, right? So we can be a bit more, or you can be a bit more ambitious and a bit more strict about, okay, what is it really that you do? What works, what doesn't work? Do more A/B testing. So test with different audiences, different messages, all of these kind of things. Yeah, I would strongly support.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think some of it comes from the fact that sometimes the communication aspect's a bit of an afterthought after the research. So there needs to be more effort put on the actual communication side of it as well. Yeah.
Fully agree. Yes.
So yeah, one more question for you is I'm curious in your personal career how you've managed to get so involved in the public outreach and engagement, and how you found that in terms of your academic reputation.
No, yeah, oh yeah. So good question, and a very long story that I won't have time to get into it. But I was very much in the news cycle when the Malaysian airplane MH370 got lost in the Indian Ocean, and in a month I did something like 120 interviews with all large media companies in the world. I was on CNN 6 days in a row, etc., etc. And that really spurred my, well, and it got me as a practitioner a lot of experience in media, especially in broadcast media. And then I got more and more interested actually in the science of it. And I was fortunate enough to get this opportunity where the dean here in Utrecht University was looking for someone to lead a new research group into the effectiveness of science communication. And I now have this role, and that is really exciting. I have no training in communication science or in sociology or anything, but I do now start to think about, well, how can the methods and results from those fields, how can they be applied to science communication?
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear your story, that it sparked from just exposure to working with the media and natural interest in that. I think Paula has one more question as well. Do you want to go ahead, Paula?
Yes, it's also to Erik. Sorry, Marie-Céline. So I was just wondering, I mean, you were talking quite close to the beginning about sort of the role of scientists as people to warn of what's coming and what could be happening. But we've heard from Marie-Céline about, that there needs to be an element of hope. So I don't know if you've seen the Don't Look Up movie where, they're sort of asked to soften this story of a apocalypse because it's, it can't be digested. And of course, that's an exaggeration. But, is there some truth in that? Even for scientists, are they still looking for a balance of messages from us as well?
Yeah, good question. I've been thinking about that myself. I don't have the answer. I find it very difficult to have any hope in a climate crisis at the moment, to be honest. So I wouldn't probably be the best to talk about hope, but that's maybe where we need professionals. But I haven't seen research that really shows this yet. So something to investigate. Yeah,
but then maybe Marie-Céline can weigh in on that. I mean, the inputs that you get from scientists, is that always also quite negative, or do you see a balance in the messages you get that influences your campaigns?
I think it evolved. I'm new in the ocean conservation world, like 3 years, and only in the past 3 years I see more and more hope. Maybe thanks to conferences, like you have more and more conferences focused on the ocean. It's more and more in the media. I have the feeling scientists keep neutrality. It's still negative because the neutrality, I don't know how to say it, but the facts are negative, like we're going in the wrong way. But then they're trying to raise awareness, and then people have action through hope. So there is still neutrality, but I have the feeling more and more we're trying at least to communicate about what's going on.
Thanks both.
So we're coming up to 4 o'clock, so I think we'll wrap it up now. But I'd like to thank Erik and Marie-Céline for very interesting talks and very interesting discussion. So thank you, and thank you for the audience as well for listening in this afternoon and for contributing all of your questions and comments and for engaging in the conversation. So all of these, this session will be available on YouTube, on the CommOCEAN YouTube channel, and also all the other sessions from the conference in case you want to go back and see the sessions from that were live and set. So yeah, thank you everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.